We've told you about what's wrong with the Boeing company. The Boeing company got taken over by Wall Street. It used to be a great manufacturing company of aircraft, and then it got taken over by the vultures on Wall Street that only care about quarterly profits. So now their planes are being made in a very shoddy way, and they're skirting all the regulations, and that's why doors are flying off, engines are catching on fire, tires are falling off, and the people who work there are now admitting on undercover video from Al Jazeera that they wouldn't fly in the planes that they're building. You want to hear it? Here it is.
This is a Boeing factory in the U.S. state of South Carolina. Workers here in Charleston are assembling the company's flagship product, the 787 Dreamliner. But this footage reveals some have little faith in the plane they build.
Did you fly one? No. You won't fly one. Did you fly one of these planes?
So there, I don't know if you can hear, but we put the graphic, the copies up on the screen. They're asking the workers who are they're building the planes, would you fly on one of these? And every one of them is saying, no, I wouldn't. The one guy said, I never thought about it, but no, I wouldn't.
Oh my God.
They're all saying that.
According to the text that went out on, 10 out of 15 that they asked said they would not fly on these planes.
There's a little bit more to this. Let me play it.
15 workers asked randomly. 10 said they would not fly on the Dreamliner.
I wouldn't fly on one of these planes because I see the quality going down around here.
An employee captured the footage after contacting Al Jazeera to tell us he had serious concerns about what he was seeing. At his request, we changed his voice.
With all the problems reported on the 787, there's 90% that's getting swept away. Hushed up. It's an iceberg.
In another meeting, the source told us workers are often underskilled, uncaring, and in some cases on drugs.
I've seen a lot of things that should not go on at an airplane plant. People talking about doing drugs, looking for drugs.
It's all coke and painkillers and what's the other one? You can get weed here. It's really good weed. They don't know that that's nobody.
I know they don't.
Yeah, there are people who go out there and want to go smoke one up.
Do they?
Hell yeah.
Over the course...
So what that guy was saying is that they get all kinds of drugs, from coke to OxyContin to weed. They go out and smoke weed at their lunch break and come back in because they don't drug test anybody. And let me just predict what's going to be the result of this undercover investigation by Al Jazeera. There will be a bill introduced in Congress to ban Al Jazeera in the United States. Because remember when they used to do undercover work like this and they would go to meatpacking places and they got them to pass a law to make that illegal. So now you can't do undercover video in meatpacking places or supermarkets where they sell that meat, any of that stuff. And someone even made this point. Simon Van Dyck says, we used to have real journalists in America who would have been all over covering a story like this. Legacy media has devolved into a protection racket where if you buy enough ad time, they will leave you alone. Yeah. They are the digital mafia. That's exactly what's happening.
Jimmy, can you imagine buying an economy flight on one of these planes, like a Google Flights, and then really sifting through to find the low emissions flight? You know, they give the option.
Yeah.
As if I'm flying in a private jet, like I give a shit about my emissions.
I know.
In the shitty ass seats, and then you crash. I would feel like such a.
All I care about is that it's an Airbus.
Yeah.
I really am trying. The older Boeings that were made under the old regime are okay, but the newer ones, that's what they're talking about here, the 787 and the 737.
And so when did that shift happen? Boeing's when did it happen?
Boeing merged with another aeronautics company, McDonnell Douglas,
right?
And they had a very different corporate culture. Boeing prided itself on being a company of engineers, and their business philosophy was, if you build it, they will come. Build a great plane. The profits will be there. Don't build to the profits. McDonnell Douglas was exactly the opposite. It was much more like what you see now in a more advanced late stage capitalism, chasing the quarter, chasing the stock price. They merged, and that Wall Street driven corporate culture of McDonnell Douglas completely took over Boeing. Now, when you look at things like this, when you look at what's happening at Boeing, when you look at, I think I've mentioned this on your show in the past, the medical device industry is terrifying. It's terrifying. I would really recommend a Netflix documentary called The Bleeding Edge about how they just put unsafe products on the market, no consequences. There are a million loopholes because the regulators are all former device manufacturer executives, and they're just the revolving door. Same thing with Boeing. You know, you have the people at the FAA have cycled through the airlines. You had a moment in American history where, through a confluence of regulation, the values of the culture at that moment, where you were able to have capitalism without killing everybody. But that moment has passed, because in the end, the pursuit of profits is always going to end up here. It's always going to end up in a place where the profits come before people. And the breakdown of Boeing is a perfect example of that process, where in the end, it's an institution like that is almost inevitably going to get overwhelmed by chasing the stock price, and the kinds of people who are going to do that. Problem with something like Boeing is it's going to end up killing a lot of people. It already has. It already has with the Max.
And so I just want to show you, this is popular to say on Twitter and social media, and this is not the case. So this person tweets out, "This is the consequence of legalizing drugs, mass marketing, alcohol, and having a border that allows prescription drugs to flood America." That is not what this is the consequence
get the
of.
Fuck out of here.
I concentrate better on weed.
And then some people say that this is because of DEI, and this is also not because of DEI.
That's a separate issue.
That's a separate issue.
DEI is this.
This is how this is how capitalism works. What capitalism does is it eats itself, right? So now you had a good company like Boeing get bought out and merged by a bigger capitalist company, and now it's run for quarterly profits, which is what all Wall Street cares about. And so now they don't care about safety, they don't care about long-term profits, they only care about short-term quarterly profits, and that's what and then they also, the capitalists then capture the regulatory agency, which that wouldn't be so bad. Not that it's okay that Wall Street running an airline for quarterly profits, but then the Wall Street and the capitalists then learn how to capture the regulatory agencies in government that are supposed to regulate them and make sure they're following the rules and make sure they're doing safety tests and make sure that the planes are safe. So now, just like with Big Pharma, they go from the FDA, they go right to work for Big Pharma, and vice versa. Same thing over at the FAA. So now you have corporate capture of our regulatory agencies. So that's what capitalism does. We have capitalists now. Yep. They have captured the whole entire goddamn government, which is what I try to explain to people. This isn't because of legalized drugs or immigration or DEI. No. This is about capitalists buying the system, the government regulatory system that's supposed to be in place to take care of this. What I try to explain to people, when there's a session of Congress, do you think they're in there doing the business of safety or students or workers or senior citizens or anybody else except the billionaire class that has now owned them? That's exactly who's the bidding they're doing, and that's why the things are in this country the way they are, and why we can find hundreds of billions of dollars at the blink of an eye to throw to a money laundering operation like the Ukraine war before we take care of anybody here at home. That kind of money could fix everybody's homelessness problem. We could have hospitals. We could have mental health facilities for the mentally ill. The working poor could have housing. We could have everything here in the United States. But there's no billionaire interest in that. And the billionaire interest is actually to keep those people from getting those things, to make them desperate, to suppress wages, and to have us beg for authoritarian solutions to our problems. That's the world we're living in right now. And I'm not a Marxist. I mean, to the point that, I'm not a scholar on Marxists. I have a vague idea what Marx was about, but I'm pretty sure he predicted things like this. And this is called end stage capitalism, when capitalism eats itself. When you only have a few companies doing stuff, you only have a few companies making planes, you only have a few companies giving you media, you only have a few companies giving you pharmaceuticals, and they buy up the ones they only have that's what's going on right now is capitalism is eating itself. And when that happens, the consumer gets screwed. You get unsafe products and profits for the billionaire class, but everything else falls to shit. And that's what we're living in right now. That's why you have homeless people living under every bench and every bridge in this country. That's why you have people, 90% of Americans with medical debt. That's why you have senior citizens have to take half of their medicine. This is the result of capitalism co-opting your government. And so now we all work for one big corporation. It's what Chris Hedges used to talk about, inverted totalitarianism. And so instead of having a dictator, they've been replaced by the nameless, faceless corporate state. And now the corporation is the dictator. And they're the ones who can do anything they want to you at any time because they own the levers of government. And the levers of government only work with the lubrication of corruption of corporate cash. Okay. Anything else you'd like to say about this story before we move on?
Yeah, for one thing, to answer, I know what you're going to say, but just to answer your question, Jimmy, that merger was in 1997.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Keaton.
Well, this broke a couple hours ago, right as you guys were going live, but 62-year-old Boeing whistleblower John Barnett was found dead in his truck after he didn't show up for a legal interview for a case linked to Boeing. There's video of him talking about inadequate safety measures on the airplane. He was found dead of what they're calling a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
What is this,
And
a UFO?
Well, it's a safe and effective self-inflicted gunshot wound.
I mean, if he were really suicidal, he'd have just booked a flight. That's how we know.
He could have taken his Oxycontin.
Bam. Hey, come see us do a live stand-up show. We'll be in Stockholm, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Oslo, Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, Cortland, New York, Oakmont, Pennsylvania, El Paso, Texas, San Antonio, Texas, Edmonton, Vancouver, and Denver, Colorado. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.